Hi, I'm Baxter from Misfit Island. I take a product design approach in fan and athletic experiences in sports. You can find out more in the description. If you've been following this series, in the last lesson, we talked about athletes entering the portal as a signal about their experience. In software, it's churn metrics. For film, television, streaming, it's the audience exiting, physically or digitally. If you've ever worked on a film or even watched the behind the scenes footage, you know that before anyone picks up a camera, the whole story gets mapped out visually. Storyboards, scene by scene, shot by shot. You lay out the entire experience that the audience will have so you can see the arc, find the dead spots, and catch the places where the story doesn't quite connect. And that's before you spend a single dime on production. You're designing the experience on paper first. In product design, we do the same thing. It's called a journey map, or it could be a service design map. You take every touch point a user has with your product, and from their very first experience, the first time they hear about it, to the moment they either become a loyal customer or quietly disappear. You lay it all out on a timeline. And what you're looking for isn't the big, obvious stuff. You're looking for the gaps between the stages, the places where a user goes from being someone's responsibility to being nobody's responsibility, even for a few days, because that's where people disengage. Your athletic department has a journey, whether you've mapped it out or not. The question is whether anyone has ever looked at it end to end. Here's what I mean. An athlete's experience with your program starts long before they step on campus. It starts with a DM from an assistant coach or a camp invite or a highlight film response. From the very first contact, the athlete starts forming expectations about what being part of your program is going to feel like. That's your opening scene. You're setting the tone and making promises whether you realize it or not. Then the journey moves through some pretty distinct stages. I'm going to walk through them, and I want you to really think about your program specifically as I do this. So let's move on to the first stage, recruiting. This is the most intentional, most curated version of your program that exists. Everyone is on their game. The head coach is present. The facilities look amazing. The current athletes are saying all the right things. That's your trailer. And it's polished because everyone knows what's at stake. The second stage is the commitment and transition period. The athlete signs. Now there's a window between signing day and the first day on campus where the experience of your program changes somewhat dramatically. The head coach that was texting every week might go quiet. The recruiting coordinator who was their primary relationship hands them off to someone in compliance and operation. This is the first handoff, and for a lot of programs, it's the first crack in the story. The third stage is onboarding. The first few weeks on campus, orientation meetings, meeting the team, moving in, first practices. There's a ton happening, and an athlete is processing all of this while only being 18 years old and probably living away from home for the first time. In this stage, the athlete is comparing everything they're experiencing to the vision and the version of the program they were sold every single day. The fourth stage is what I call the middle. This is that long stretch from the end of the honeymoon phase through the grind of that first season. This is where most programs stop being intentional about the athlete experience because the daily operational demands take over. Coaches are coaching. Compliance is doing compliance. Academic support is running study halls, and everyone has their head down in their own department, and nobody is tracking what the athlete is actually feeling across all of these different interactions. The fifth stage is the decision point. This usually hits right before the end of the season. The athlete has now seen enough of your program and has been inside of it long enough to know whether the real version matches the trailer. Remember that from earlier? And this is where they either recommit or start looking at the portal. Now, here's what I want you to notice about these 5 primary stages. The people responsible for the athlete's experience change at almost every stage. Recruiting is run by the coaching staff. The transition is handled by someone in compliance and ops. Onboarding involves housing, academics, training staff, and more coaching. The middle is mostly coaching and academic support. And by the decision point, it's often the athlete sitting all alone with their own assessment of whether this place is right for them. Is this what they thought it was going to be, or is it completely different? In film, if you handed Act 1 to one director and Act 2 to another director and Act 3 to a third, and none of them talk to each other or even talk to the producer, or if there's no story Bible, which is what we call it, you'd get a disjointed movie that loses the audience, even if each individual act is well made. The transition between acts are where the storytelling either holds or falls apart. It's the same thing in software design, and we learned this lesson the hard way. Marketing would acquire a user, sales would close them, onboarding would set them up, customer success would manage them. Every one of those teams had their own metrics, their own priorities, and their own idea of what the customer needed. The customer would fall through the cracks as every handoff became a danger zone, and nobody was looking at the whole journey. Nobody owning the full journey is the problem. But the fix was getting someone to own the end-to-end experience and making the handoffs between teams explicit and intentional. That's where the product manager comes in. But more on that later. This is how I want you to start thinking about your program. So here's the action step for this lesson. I want you to take those 5 stages and write down 2 things, just 2, for each one. First, who in your department is primarily responsible for the athlete's experience during that stage? Just names and titles, nothing fancy. Second, what does the athlete hear from your program during that stage? Not what you think they hear, but what actually gets communicated to them. Emails, texts, meetings, conversations, or silence. By the way, don't overthink this exercise. You're not trying to build a perfect map here. What you're doing, and when you're done with this, you're going to have a rough map of your athlete's journey, and you're probably going to notice something. There's probably going to be some gaps. You're just trying to see something that's been invisible because nobody in your building probably laid it out from end to end and seeing it visually all in one place. So this will be new. Seeing these places and where the athlete gaps from daily contact to near silence, places where the person they've been building a relationship with disappears and someone new shows up without much of a transition. These are some gaps, places where nobody is really checking in at all. Those gaps are what you're going to dig into next. We're going to take 3 or 4 of the most critical handoff points in your map and run a quick audit on each one to see where the athlete experience transitions are either seamless or jarring, because that's where belonging breaks, and that's where the portal starts looking like a attractive and reasonable option. I appreciate you taking time to watch this lesson and the series. If you find any of this helpful, please put a like so that YouTube starts sharing this with other ADs. And let's get a healthy conversation going in the comments below. I'll see you on the next one.